Welcome back to another episode of the Awareness to Action Enneagram podcast. My name is Creek, and I'm with my bilingual co-hosts, María, Sikora, and María, José, Munita.
Careful there.
Well, this is true. Between the two of us, we speak two languages. Yeah, so you could say that we're bilingual. Yeah, of course. I only speak one, but yeah.
Can you say anything in another language?
Sure, I can curse at my kids in Ukrainian. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I can find the bathroom in Spanish. Or order in a restaurant.
Amazing.
Yeah. Know a little.
María, do you speak? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say I know a little bit of Polish. Oops, sorry. Yeah, a few words in Polish, but
okay, all right.
That's it.
And you speak English and Spanish, María José?
I do.
Anything else?
Fluently. Now I can read a menu in several languages, like at a restaurant. In French and Italian, probably Portuguese, but that's kind of cheating because it's too similar to Spanish. But I make sure that I know what I'm reading when I'm at a restaurant. Can find my way around those same languages, but that's about it.
That's pretty awesome. So would you
and
say
you,
that I speak enough Spanish? I wouldn't say I'm fluent, but enough Spanish, which, that sounds like a very navigating thing of you to do, María José.
Oh boy. You've been really, oh man. Would you get a book of segues, Creek? Or
I've just had Claude giving me ideas.
I'm not sure if it's navigating, is it? Just think it's
well,
useful.
I'm telling you it is navigating, because we're talking about navigating today.
Okay.
María José, do you want to define navigating for us?
Well, so navigating, it's what we call orienting to the group. It's the domain that includes things on like how to understand the landscape, understand kind of the bigger picture, the map of people, and what are the codes, clues, and how to navigate it. So it's people who have more interest. So navigators are people who have more interest in those things, read it more easily because they have got used to it, and worry or pay attention to power dynamics, identity, how people see me. So who is there? Who's around me? What are the norms or the kind of how does it work in the group, and where am I there in the hierarchy, within subgroups and things like that. So it's what a lot of people call kind of worrying about politics. That is included. It's also social in a way that it's worrying about the social dimension of it, but it's not that you're sociable necessarily, because navigators tend to want to scan the room and understand who is there, who am I, how do I want to be perceived here, which sometimes makes you be quiet and not really sociable.
I just want to clarify something on what you said about the political part of it, because sometimes that means, people interpret that as, well, only navigators are interested in politics, or all navigators are interested in politics. And what we mean by politics there is the operations of a group, right? The power structures, the interactions, and that sort of thing. Not necessarily governmental politics. People of all instinctual biases can be interested in those things, and some quite passionate about governmental politics. And not all navigators are passionate about governmental politics. So, but when it comes to group dynamics, politics in that sense, that really tends to be the sweet spot for navigators.
Yeah. how to craft a message so that it's perceived as you want it to be perceived, so that it gives the right idea, or what the idea that you want to send. So it's those kind of things. It's thinking, kind of stop and think how you want to do things so that it works the way you want in the group setting.
Now, you all do not use the word social. Why?
Yeah. Well, there's a few reasons. The main one is because typically when people hear that word, at least in English, at least in the U.S., there's a tendency to associate it with being extroverted, being outgoing, wanting to be around people all the time. And not every navigator will say that's the situation with them. I think I feel like I've said this before, but, my wife would consider me antisocial in a lot of ways because I'm very particular about who I interact with. And some people that if I don't feel like interacting with them, I just don't. I can hole up for quite long periods. But there is this thing in me that needs to be around people, at least in the abstract in some way, right? And that can take the place of, a lot of times navigators will get those needs met through watching movies or reading books about people and that sort of thing, or going to a Starbucks and just kind of being around people without necessarily interacting with them. So it's different from what is typically understood as social. The other misunderstanding and the other connotation of that I think causes people to misunderstand this domain is they tend to think that, navigators or socials are very focused on social issues. They're social reformers. They want to change things. They want to kind of shape the way that the world is. And that's not really my experience of navigators. They might have ideas about how the world should be, but they're more seeking to understand it and interact with it and figure out where they fit into it than they are to convert people to some point of view. That tends to be something that we see more in transmitters, quite frankly.
Yeah, so I think that depending on the type as well, or the subtype, the combination between navigating and the strategy that we are talking about, some might feel the need to be part of social groups, to influence, to have a role. But that's kind of a smaller scale than social reformers.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the people who get labeled as social subtypes in the Enneagram literature, like a Gandhi, for example, is one I see all the time, we would consider a transmitter, right? We would consider the Gandhi as a transmitting type 1 rather than a social type 1. Maria José, for example, she's interested in how society works, but you'll never find her trying to reshape the world in the same way that Gandhi would. And you just don't see that in navigating ones in the same way. Would you agree, Maria José?
I do. And it's, again, I might want to influence my world, but it's a smaller scale.
Yeah. In fact, I'm leery of people who want to change the world because, why should I let the world be changed the way you want it to be, right? I mean, who are you that you get the right to say how the world should be? If anyone is
going to change it, I will.
Yeah, right. But that's not even really something that interests me all that much, right? I mean, I'm because number one, never mind. But that's not a huge interest of mine.
All right. And so, folks, if you want to learn more about navigating, there's plenty of other episodes down the feed. Get all your questions answered. And then if there's a question that was not answered, you can contact us through the ways in the show notes. Yeah. So
can I also say, since you're on this topic, Creek, in the Enneagram in a Movie podcast, we are going through the subtypes. So we talk quite a bit about the navigating domain. In fact, every third episode is about one of the types and the navigating subtype. And also our certification program goes quite deep into the instinctual biases. So atacertification.com.
And those certifications also go quite deep into the pattern of expression.
Yes. Boy, oh boy, man, oh man, you're just on a roll with the segues today.
Mario, what's the navigating pattern of expression?
So again, it is our experience that there is, and we stay away from the word stacking. Okay, we don't care about stacks. We don't care about what somebody's stack is. We care about the relationships that people have with the three domains. And what we find is that navigators tend to have a conflict, an inner conflict with the transmitting domain. So they're drawn to it in some ways. They do it in a way that fits their role. And otherwise, though, they're uncomfortable with it. And in fact, they can have some kind of embarrassment about it. And they can have some kind of, they can often have disdain for people who they think transmit too much. The zone of indifference is the preserving domain. And what we mean by that is that navigators tend not to be so great at the nuts and bolts stuff. Okay, they're not so great at the details. They're not so great at necessarily taking care of their health or, some of the other things related to the preserving domain. Now, this doesn't mean that some specific navigators or individual navigators won't be really good at any of those things, but it tends to be something they've developed consciously rather than something they're naturally interested in.
And I know you say in the zone of inner conflict, you're probably better at it than you think. Mm-hmm. Would you say something like that to the indifference?
You're probably worse at it than you think.
Yeah. So there's, you might have tools for the zone of indifference. Like in my case, like I'm at navigating 1, and the attention to detail that it's typical of preservers, I can have it, And I studied business administration. I know how to create a budget and to follow up on it. I have all those skills. I'm just not interested. So it's tricky. You would think that because I have these backgrounds, could be good at that, but I just don't care enough to pay attention to it many times. Sometimes I do, of course, but you can be good. The problem is that you don't pay enough attention to it.
Yeah.
I think in some ways you could say, like, we always use the analogy of cooking and food, but that's like, I like that for a different reason, and it happens to be in the preserving domain.
Yeah.
Yeah, and food is broad. I mean, this year, one of my goals is to eat more healthy food.
Just eat.
I love cooking. I like eating nice food, but I just don't like healthy food. And I don't like to pay attention, to have to go through the burden to me of having to think about healthy food, especially when at home we live 3 people and we all eat different things. And but so food is too broad. I don't think you can categorize it in one domain.
Sure.
Yeah, we always have to be really careful about cherry picking specific behaviors and activities when we're talking about the instinctual biases, right? It's very easy to say, oh, well, I'm very attuned to what's going on in my neighborhood, and use that as a justification of somebody being navigating, for example. I barely know my neighbor's names, right? I mean, so, and you could say, well, that's because he's indifferent to that sort of thing. No, I'm just indifferent to my neighbors, but other navigating things take up all of my time and attention. Okay? And any of us can find other activities that for whatever reason we might have picked up some interest in or some capability in, what we have to keep remembering is that when we're talking about the instinctual biases, we have to step back and look at the patterns over time of what people do. And what is somebody seem to be prioritizing the most through their behaviors, through what they talk about, through what they think about, through the emotional affect that they have related to something, and not get caught up in the particulars. And this is the thing that always, whenever I'm talking with somebody who, it's typically people who are already, somewhat knowledgeable about the Enneagram, they'll get fixated on one thing and say, oh, well, I do this, and use that as a justification for amplifying in their minds how much of a particular domain they pay attention to.
What are some other common strengths and weaknesses for the navigating?
I think that because navigators want to understand the group and the group dynamics, they end up being quite good at reading them properly and understanding how to move around that, to navigate kind of the social structure, and also understanding how to build relationships that are more long-term, like more collaborative relationships. Because it's like, that if you build those relationships and you invest in them over time, they will be there when you need them. And you might never need them, but it's like that kind of mindset. It's people end up many times trusting navigators because they're not expecting anything from you right away.
I think it's helpful to think of navigators as curators and aggregators in a certain way, right? They're always sort of collecting little bits of information. They're always sort of connecting the dots between things, and just, we talk about looking at the landscape, right? So you're looking out at the bigger picture of things and asking yourself, okay, how do all these pieces fit together? I was talking to interviewing a client yesterday, and he was a navigating type, and he's in customer relations management. And he described his job as putting together a puzzle of 100 different pieces that keep changing all the time, and you're trying to get it as close to looking like the cover of the box as possible. And that really described for me what navigating's all about. It's like, okay, I see this sort of landscape, and I'm trying to put all the pieces together, and I'm always paying attention to how the pieces are changing and updating the puzzle accordingly.
And those pieces are not just people.
Oh, no, absolutely not. But they're often, at least indirectly, related to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember before knowing about the instinctual biases, I always wondered why I had such an obsession in trying to put everything in a one page. Like, I needed to understand things in such a way that I would be able to put it on one page, like understand the system. And I couldn't rest until I did, with the important things, of course. And maybe I'm going kind of ahead too much, but I'm jumping ahead. But when I'm trying to coach people in order to develop some navigating skills, that's one task that I give them. I say, okay, so put together in one page your system. Who are your stakeholders? What are the different groups? And who do you care about? What are the relationships you need to build? And but first, create the map. Because to me, that's automatic. I just have it. I'm building it all the time. But how do you explain navigating to someone? Preserving it's easier, I would say, and transmitting it's probably more evident. But how do you build those skills for somebody who's not navigating? And to me, that's one of the things. What I do naturally, I try to have my clients to create and start building that muscle.
There's an evolutionary biologist and anthropologist named Robin Dunbar who noticed something years ago that now is called Dunbar's number. And it's that tribes, primitive tribes tended to function in groups of about 150 people. Okay. And so humans have the ability to track roughly, give or take, about 150 people. And most organizations are set up in divisions or groups that typically are no more than that, because that's what we can track. Okay, it doesn't mean that's all the people we know, but it's the number of people that we can kind of keep track of. And within that, he created kind of smaller circles, right? So there's the 3 to 5 people that, are really, really close, right? The people that you would call to help you bury a body or something like that, okay? Or if you needed money.
Or move.
Or, okay, well, okay. I speak, we speak from our own experiences. What can I say?
Okay.
And then there's another circle that's, 5 to 15, the people who are, good friends. And then there's 15 to 50 people that we consider friends and so forth. And it goes out. And navigators are kind of always in their head and moving people within these circles, right? Okay, this one's here, that one's there. And Dunbar would say that by extension, we can, through knowing certain people, we can get access to their number as well. So this is kind of where the navigator's mind always is. Who are the people in the circles? Who moves in, who moves out, who's doing what, who knows who, etc.
Last episode, we talked about someone like a preserving 7 would be a difficult combination to kind of see. What's the equivalent? Maybe harder subtypes to see in the navigating domain, and maybe the quintessential subtypes.
I'd say that the navigating 8, it's less evident when you think about the description of the 8. It can be misleading because they're less obviously assertive. They're more political. They just go behind the scenes manipulating things, but not kind of asserting themselves as a transmitting 8 would, for example. And I've seen it with Mario. I mean, how many people have tried to convince you that you're not an 8? And when I first met you,
know me. Yeah.
Yeah, well, when I first met you, I thought, something that it's not right here. And then
But that had nothing to do with my personality type necessarily, right?
And then I realized how you assert yourself. And it's a different way. It's a more political way. So I would say that, yes, the 8 has different ways of being assertive than, or striving to feel powerful than a transmitting or preserving 8.
Yeah. I think kind of the quintessential navigator might be the navigating 3, right? And navigating 3s are really, really savvy at group dynamics, networking, not in a blatant, necessarily go up and, hey, how you doing? Here's my business card type. But they're really, really keyed into reading the room, reading who's in the room, who's related to who, and that sort of thing. I think the navigating 1, on the other hand, again, is, one of those ones that doesn't quite stick out as clearly navigating as some of the others might, or as one-ish as some of the others might.
Until you get to know them.
Well, exactly. And this is what happens with all of these, right? And with people in general, right? I mean, this is why typing people can be such a challenge, and it's why we should be so careful about meeting someone and saying, oh, I don't think you're a this or you're a that, because things often reveal themselves over time through the pattern.
Yeah, and I think that one of the problems is that we're too wedded to a stereotypical description of each type. And what we're talking about here is not that Mario is less of an 8 because he's navigating. He's one kind of 8, and I'm one kind of 1 that it's a navigating 8 and a navigating 1. But it's just less like the description in the books of most 8s and 1s.
Yeah. Or 4s. Navigating 4s don't
Yeah.
necessarily jump out as quintessential 4s all the time.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. How do the strengths and weaknesses tie into the pattern of expression?
Yes.
First, can I, Maria, I'll let you go, but first I just want to say, again, we always have to draw a distinction between skillfulness and attention to something. Okay, so just because somebody's a navigator doesn't mean they're going to be skilled at navigating or any of the behaviors associated with it any more than they're going to be bad at things related to preserving or transmitting. Skill is different from attention. So and again, as we said with the preservers, usually the people that we work with are pretty successful already, and that means that they're pretty skilled at working on things or working with tools related to their instinctual bias. But this doesn't mean everybody that you encounter will be.
Yeah. So some weaknesses might have to do with all 3 domains. So you might kind of overdo navigating and be too interested in gossip and political intrigue in the organization, and that can be bad. So or too focused on comparing yourself to others. So that excessive attention can become a weakness. On the other hand, with the zone of indifference that it's preserving, poor attention to details might have come at a cost, or not, I don't know, just following processes or procedures and not being, paying your bills, or just because you are not paying attention to that. Now, in terms of the zone of inner conflict, it can come in different ways. But because navigators are conflicted in that domain, they might not promote themselves enough, not be out there because they're just too conflicted about standing out or showing that you think too highly of yourself, or just as a navigator have a higher inhibition, and that might be something that doesn't help you in your career or personal life.
We see over and over again, and this is what led me to the conclusion that this pattern of expression is a real thing, is that, again, with the clients we work with, navigators are really good at the organizational dynamics pieces of things. They're really good at seeing the bigger picture and reading the landscape. They're so-so at the transmitting stuff. They can do it, but they have to put their mind to it, and they are most comfortable when it's part of their job description or part of their job responsibility. And where they almost always struggle, or what their Achilles heel would be, is related to the preserving domain. And they might be quite good at some parts of the preserving, behaviors or preserving parts of a job, but it will become the Achilles heel because at some point when they should be paying attention to it, they'll fail to do so. Okay, it doesn't mean that they fail to do so all the time, but they're much more likely to not pay attention to things related to preserving than they are to not pay attention to things related to navigating.
All right, so when you're coaching navigators who are using the awareness to action process, tell me what it's like. What is that like in a coaching session? María José.
So there's some simple, I was going to say easy because it's not easy, simple things. And first, just as we said with the preservers, you need to pay attention or try to work on things that have a cost for you, that it's a problem that you don't do them or do them too much. And be specific about those behaviors and try to change that. If you tell a navigator you have to be more preserving, it's too broad and it feels like, why should I? I mean, I know that I should, but I don't want to. But when you look at preserving behaviors, I always say the same thing, and I keep being bad at it, but responding to emails, or I don't know, scheduling as a coach, coaching sessions or following up on things. So all of those things are preserving. And I understand the value of them, but in my mind, other things are even more important. So I pay attention to those things. I prefer to be at a meeting with someone than be on my computer doing those things. Now, the cost of that, it's not in the preserving domain. It will affect my public identity. It will affect my reputation. And if that happens, it touches on a navigating thing that I do care about. So when I see it that way, when I help my clients see it that way and say, in order to satisfy a navigating need, you need to work on this preserving behavior. That's the only way in which you'll get them to do it.
Yeah. You always, always, always have to appeal to somebody's values and appeal to something that matters to them when you're trying to get them to modify a behavior. Okay? You can do it by intimidation and fear and guilt, or you can try to, and you might get results for a short while, but eventually they will find some sort of workaround where they don't feel shame, embarrassment, guilt, obligation, etc. So you always have to find something that matters to somebody. And with navigators, when you want them to develop a behavior that is related to preserving or transmitting, you have to help them understand why it will be good for them using navigating language. It's very simple. Okay? For me, it's, I love getting out into the world. Okay, I love to go places and meet with clients and travel to places and all these sort of things. And I have to keep remembering, if I don't do the transmitting stuff of promoting my business, for example, doing podcasts, doing videos, all these sort of things, then nobody's going to know who I am and they're not going to hire me. And if I don't take care of myself physically, and if I don't do the fundamental administrative stuff that needs to happen, I'm not going to be able to get out there into the world. But if you try to speak to me in preserving language, or you speak to me in transmitting language, it's like if Maria José speaks to me in Spanish, right? I might catch a word or two, but she's not going to get the result that she wants. Okay, so she has to say, okay, if I want to talk to this idiot, I got to switch to English. Okay?
That's why my English has got so much better.
That's exactly right.
That's the trick.
Find an idiot.
Yeah, exactly. And force yourself to do it for 15 years. Yeah.
Wow. Long suffering indeed.
Yeah, 16 now.
Wow, there you go. Our relationship could drive, Maria José, in the United States. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is that you need to outsource or automate as much as you can. Because just the understanding that you're not paying attention to things that will have a cost is a first step. And not trying to say, okay, no, I should do it, I will do it, but then you don't. So you need to try to see, how much of this can I outsource? How can I make my life simple? The important thing here is that you make sure that it happens, not that you do it yourself. Have someone in your team do it. Automate it with, I don't know, AI, or hire someone to do that for you. Just make sure that it does happen.
It's funny because in the Enneagram world, we get criticized for that sometimes, right? We get criticized for saying it doesn't have to be three equal legs of a stool, right? We're only too happy to take a matchbook, stick it under that short leg and, use it as a prop. Okay. So, that's fine. But nowhere in the world do we actually expect people to be equally good at everything. In organizations, your finance person is not a great salesperson or a great engineer, and you don't expect them to be. You expect them to understand enough about those things so that they can get by and then focus on their skill. Conversely, in the training world, there's this idea that you should only focus on your strengths, right? Just don't worry about the other stuff. That's all well and good if you just want to be an individual contributor, okay? But if you want to be a senior leader, you have to figure out what you need to be good enough at, and then be good enough at those things. And you have to figure out what I can safely delegate or outsource, like María José is saying, and then delegate or outsource those things. But you always have to be conscious of what matters and focus on that.
And that applies to the non-corporate human as well.
Of course it does. Of course it does. Yeah.
At home, much of the trouble in relationships has to do with this. It's like, I care about this, you care about that. We just don't connect in those ways. And we take it personal.
Mario, you live with a preserver. How do you create a good relationship with that preserver?
By pretending like I think that it matters.
Transition.
Yeah,
just FYI.
Yeah. So, again, it's if you want to communicate to somebody, you have to speak their language and you have to operate within their set of values. So with my wife, who's a preserver, I have to remember that, number one, preserving things matter to her. And even if they don't matter to me, if I want the relationship to, be healthy and to operate smoothly, I have to pretend that I care. Okay. And pay and recognize that these things actually are more important than maybe I give them credit for. And I have to be patient when her tendency will go toward those things, and just recognize that as much as I want to focus on navigating stuff, she wants to focus on preserving stuff. So I got to let her do it for a while. And then I get the opportunity to talk about the stuff that I care about sometimes, and we find ways to meet in the middle. But this is the way we should be approaching every relationship. Okay? Understanding the instinctual biases just makes it easier, because what most people don't realize in relationships is that most of their conflict is around the instinctual biases. Okay? Some of it's due to Enneagram type, of course, as well, the strategy, but an incredible amount of it is just a fundamental mismatch of instinctual bias and the assumption that what you care about is not important, but what I care about is, when in fact they're equally important.
María José, don't you live with a transmitter?
I do. It's my daughter, just to be clear. She might listen to this. I need to be careful.
And her English is very good, too. So, fortunately, my wife doesn't listen to these things. So,
So, just to step back a bit, I think that understanding the instinctual biases and the pattern of expression helps you appreciate what they bring. And that helps in relationships at home and at work. I think that when you see that it's not that they want to make your life difficult or that they don't care about what you care about, it's just that's the way they are, and it has a benefit. It has strengths. And almost admire and appreciate what they bring helps be more open in that relationship, and that's in general. So with my transmitting daughter, sometimes it's hard for me to understand, and I do say this to her, because we're very different. But, and sometimes it's exhausting, because we have different ways of engaging. So I just understanding and sometimes saying, this is too much for me, or this is not personal, but I am not prepared to take on this much, or react in ways that are respectful and explaining yourself better to the other person. Having a common language helps. in all cases, not just with a navigator and a transmitter.
And there's simple things you can do. For example, when I'm talking with transmitters, I just consciously speed up the way I talk, right? I amplify. I will deliberately become more sort of excitable and have a heightened affect. And with preservers, I'll tend to slow it down a little bit more. Okay. Now, I don't do this in every situation, but if I am consciously trying to build rapport or effectively communicate to somebody, I'll keep those things in mind, right? So we can use this as kind of a calibration tool to say, I'm going up in affect, meaning I'm moving from preserver or navigator up to transmitter, and I can amp up the energy or do the opposite.
And talking about energy, I think that it's important when you're working with someone or with yourself to keep in mind that working on your zone of inner conflict or zone of indifference requires a lot of energy. It's more tiring. So you need to be selective around what you work on and understand that you will get tired. Because it's when you're on your zone of enthusiasm, it's just more natural. But with the other two, it's like exhausting at times. Yeah. And you have to be aware of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of our last thing here before we close up, for the coaches out there that are navigators, what are their strengths and the weaknesses as coaches?
Well, they're clearly the best. No. We probably talked about this a bit with the preserving domain. There are certain things that navigators are going to probably have more skill at, right? And be better coaching people in certain areas, be more credible coaching people in certain areas than they might be in others. And of course, there are dangers to that too. So it's important for you to understand what your natural tendencies are and to realize that you're probably not seeing the whole picture, because when you're coaching a preserver and they want to talk about things that you don't think are important, that's probably a blind spot for you, right? They may well be important. And so you have to be willing to recognize what it is the person needs and help them with that if you can, even if you don't think it's as important. And you have to be careful. Well, go ahead, María.
No, so that's kind of the agenda you have with your client. Mm-hmm. And then there is your practice, how you run it, and focusing on the navigating stuff. I think that allows you to build trust with clients that you already have, understand the bigger picture really quickly, help with topics like culture and things like that. Now, there might be an issue, as María said, with promoting your practice, selling yourself to kind of cold leads, and not being thorough in the processes and procedures, and that might have a cost.
Yeah. It's important, just to step back and go to the client relationship again, it's important not to drag your client into your preferred domain just because you think it's the most comfortable. And it's important that you don't judge your client or assess your client only through your preferred domain. And I think a lot of coaches fall into this.
Yeah. And I think that, as you said before, understanding your strengths helps you have a kind of a sales pitch that it's more attuned to what you can offer, what your strengths are. And we have talked about several times how we end up working with clients that need us because we're navigating. So we probably don't have a great fit with people who need not with preserving clients, but people who need preserving help.
Yeah, I've got a client, for example, who's a preserver. He's a CEO of a company, and that company has me go to their regular team meetings and just sit there and not say anything. I mean, I don't say a word for a day and a half. I just sit there and watch, and afterwards the CEO will say, okay, tell me what happened, right? What did I miss? What things do I need to know? Who needs to step up more? Who needs to do more of this, more of that, et cetera? And then we do a debrief each time, right? And it's because he knows, okay, this is what Mario's good at. I have my face buried in the spreadsheets. Mario can pay attention to what's going on around me, which works. So he's found a smart way to outsource that.
How do I get hired to do that? Just sit there and watch.
Yeah, I do the same.
You got to get better at transmitting, Creek, and
I'm trying. All right. Any final words before we sign off here?
I just want to say again, the key takeaway for me is to make sure you really understand what navigating is. And people have a tendency to think it's just social, right? It's just, these being social, or it's not. It's reading things. It's understanding the group. It's tracking the herd, and it's figuring out the implications of the messages and the signals that we read in people.
Awesome. Well, thanks, folks, for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right. So long.
Cheers.